major drawback? 1/25th scale. Almost every other company had standardized at 1/24th, but K&B had inherited 1/25 from parent Aurora, which had used the size for many of its automotive model kits. In fact, the K&B Ford GT used elements from Aurora's model kit. K&B ultimately fell into line in releasing future cars in 1/24. K&B issued its first pair of 1/24 cars during the summer of 1965, and praise from slot hobbyists was immediate. The Porsche 906 916 and Ferrari 250 GTO were noted for detailed, lightweight plastic bodies. The Porsche 906 caught some car buffs by surprise. Though familiar with the 904, many didn't know Porsche had revamped the car. As it turns out, K&B had received design help on its model directly from Porsche. The new kits incorporated K&B's latest innovation, the patented Posi-Lock wheel attachment system. Most wheels slipped onto coarsely threaded axles and locked into place with nuts. This usually meant wheels were off-center, sometimes working loose during races. Posi-Lock was simple. Wheels stayed in place with a collet, a tapered sleeve you could position anywhere on a smooth axle. Turn a nut, lock the collet, true the wheel position, and your car's tires were locked. For serious racers, this new feature provided a competitive advantage on the racetrack. Like its corporate parent, K&B moved into ready-to-race 1/24 cars, aimed at serious hobbyists. The new products had Posi-Lock wheels and were powered by various K&B Mabuchi motors. Taking another lesson from Aurora, K&B went against the convention and mounted its motors Sidewinder style. And because of K&B's slow release schedule, most cars had the prevailing Mabuchi or Aurora motor of the day. The first in the series, the Ford Lotus 30 Charger, came with a new 9-volt Royal Bobcat. The Cooper F1 of early 1966 was powered by a K&B Wildcat. The Cooper was a narrow-bodied, open-wheeled Formula One racer, so it took a smaller 16D size motor mounted in-line. Model Car Science tested the 9-volt Wildcat against the Aurora-built 6-volt Super Challenger in May 1966 and found the Challenger had better top-end speed on a long track, while the Wildcat performed better on a short, tight track. In a bow to advanced racers' concerns, K&B converted to vacuum-formed bodies. The reason? Cars with injection-molded bodies looked better, but their heavier weight made them too slow for serious racing. By 1966, slot car sales had increased so much that K&B expanded to 2 assembly lines running 16 hours a day. 10,000 cars rolled off these lines daily. Would it ever end? Trouble with the licensor. Back in West Hempstead, Aurora's move into large-scale cars led to legal questions involving Aurora's license agreement with Carl Robinett. As intellectual property owner of the basic Aurora HO system, Robinett had been paid royalties on every model motoring products made since 1960. However, when Aurora launched its large-scale slot systems, Robinett asked to be paid the same royalty on the new products. Joe Giammarino offered to pay a smaller fee, 1 to 1.5%. Robinett refused and filed suit. The case ultimately went to trial, turning on the question of exactly what Robinett had licensed to Aurora. Robinett claimed to have developed the slot car concept. To investigate Robinett's claims, the court visited a local raceway and watched cars in action. Nat Polk testified on Aurora's behalf, even bringing a 1912 Lionel racing set into the courtroom to demonstrate that the basic electric car idea was a very old one. Even more compelling was the revelation that, unknown to Derek Brand, Robinett had patented the vibrator motor in his own name. Carl Robinett lost his suit, and Aurora paid him in excess of $1 million to buy out his licensor status. Aurora was free from license payments forever. The peak. 1966 was the peak of the slot car boom. Craft, model, and hobby industry estimated that the United States had more slot raceways than bowling alleys, over 5,000. More conservative estimates placed the number of properly equipped full-time race centers at 600. But the dollar figures didn't exaggerate a thing. Total sales of slot car equipment had risen from $100 million in 1964 to $170 million in 1965, and the growth curve was still headed towards the sky. As slot fever soared, voices of concern rose. Aurora's regional survey found that in the East, slot centers are popping up like mad. while in California, where the craze had begun, the number was declining. The quick-rise boom days are nearing an end. Rich Palmer wrote in an August report, boom days for these centers lasted from 6 months to 2 years, and then they began to disappear as fast as they opened up. There were more insidious problems with large-scale slot cars. Raceways existed for the excitement of competition, but by 1966 a handful of racers in each market had refined their skills so well they won every race. A huge gap developed between most racers and a small group of pros. When average racers discovered they had no hope of winning, they dropped out of the sport for good. The incessant demand for more speed led to a mad scramble among large-scale slot car manufacturers. Better motors, tires, chassis, and every other racing car part that might slice a fraction of a second off lap times was marketed. The result was proliferation of new products and rapid obsolescence of the old. Retailers found themselves bombarded with customer demands for the latest products while shelves were still filled with last month's hot items. Worse, the typical teenage slot racer discovered that building a competitive race car was a very big drain on his allowance. Distributors and retailers were making less money because the number of people renting lanes were shrinking and they were regularly stuck with obsolete merchandise they couldn't move. And no one seemed to have the answer. Aurora's wrong turn, K&B's marginal success. In this hothouse atmosphere, Aurora vowed it would become the leader in 1/32, just as it was in 1/87. The company paid little attention to the warning signs in large-scale slot car racing and forged ahead with grand development plans. And ultimately, it would pay a heavy price. In 1967, Aurora brought out the innovative slot cycle, the Thunder Cycle. Unfortunately, in the dwindling large-scale marketing environment, Aurora had chosen the wrong scale in its big slot gamble. By the mid-1960s, most serious slot racers focused on 124. Minra, originally Aurora's clandestine hobby management organization, found at its 1966 National Drag Championship that 124 scale cars outnumbered 132nd by a margin of 6-1. Minra dropped 132nd from its 1967 program. To sound the death knell, Aurora 132nd A-Jets were a commercial failure in department stores. To further confuse Aurora's perception of large-scale slot cars, its subsidiary K&B continued to enjoy moderate success in large-scale slots. For example, K&B stole the show at HIA 1966 with its patented Cortina mechanical brake. Jose Rodriguez Jr. reported to the car model April 1966. This Cortina mechanical brake by K&B stops like nothing I have ever seen. This was the only real innovation I saw at the show. Traditional brake systems were nothing more than electrical cutoffs. The Cortina, however, was a tiny, lightweight disc brake featuring a central drum flanked by 2 Teflon discs. It fit around a car's rear axle next to the spur gear. On power track, the brake stayed in the open position and had no effect on the car's performance. However, when current was shut off, the discs clamped together and locked up like the rear axle. With a Cortina brake in his car, a racer, particularly one with a heavy car, could retain his straightaway speed far more deeply into the curve before having to hit the brake. Suddenly, skidding became a real factor in slot car racing, and it took time to master the brake. The Cortina was first sold separately as an accessory, but soon select K&B cars featured it as standard equipment.